for the state calls Detective Jim Cooper.
Raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth?
I do, Your Honor.
Please be seated.
Thank you.
Detective Cooper, when you get a minute, will you tell the jury your full name and why it's disorganized over here, what you do for a living?
It's Detective James L. Cooper, spelled C-O-O-P-E-R. I work for the City of Seattle with the Seattle Police Department as a homicide detective.
How long have you worked for Seattle Police Department?
Approximately 28 years.
How long have you been a homicide detective?
Approximately 12.
Do you have a homicide unit, or how does that work in terms of the detectives in your office?
The Seattle Police Homicide Unit is made up of 3 different squads. We have 5 people per squad. You have 2 teams of 2 in each squad. The 5th person is like, as in basketball, you have the 6th person coming off the bench. So we have that person. We also have 2 other detectives assigned to the homicide unit, one working elderly abuse cases, and the other one works fugitive cases. And basically, the fifth detective in each squad, we're the only department that the King County Prosecutor's Office will rush file cases on felony or assault type cases where a suspect's apprehended that night, so we can rush that file case and get that person charged immediately. Those other detectives will make sure those cases get filed.
Were you the lead detective on this shooting that we're here for?
Myself and my partner, Detective Takamoto, we were the primary investigators for this case.
How did that assignment occur? When did you first get notified that you were going to be the lead for this case?
Each squad, the pairs I was talking about, the pairs are in a rotation for basically the next murder that occurs in the city of Seattle. And on this certain date, my partner and I, we were the next up detectives for the next homicide in the city of Seattle.
So where were you when you got the call in?
Because we're on call, I mean, it doesn't change anything in our daily activities. We have other cases. Our unit is responsible for investigating not only homicide cases, but all violent crimes that occur in Seattle, such as assaults, kidnappings, things of that nature. And the cases where, let's say I am out and I get attacked and the suspect runs off, that's what we call a whodunit case. Even though we handle homicide cases, the pairs will investigate those cases. So we're working felony assault cases, other homicide cases. So we're working a regular caseload, and we're in the office regularly. And on this day, I was at my desk working on another case. I have the radio, the department radio on, and I scan all the frequencies. When the alert tones went off, and the radio announced that there was a shooting at Seattle Pacific University.
And your partner, Detective Takamoto, is the one running behind me in and out of the courtroom.
He's my gopher.
Where was he? And when this occurred, was he in the office working with you?
He was actually in the north end investigating another case where I believe he was contacting witnesses or something of that nature, but he just happened to be in the north end.
So once you guys, your next step is your case. What did you do? How did you begin your investigation?
I was contacted by my Sergeant Worstman, and we were all in the office. We had a full contingent of detectives in the office. As soon as the tones went off, we heard it was at the Seattle Pacific University. Officers were reporting multiple people were already injured. We knew this was going to be an all-hands-on-deck call-out. Both our sergeants at the time, Sergeant Valor and Worstman, responded immediately with the other detectives en route with them. I contacted my partner and notified him of the incident if he wasn't aware of it, and he was. He decided to respond there. I went to my vehicle, and then I was contacted that the medical examiner's office contacted us that one of the victims at the scene had been pronounced deceased. That was Paul Lee. I remember that day it was a warm day. But traffic was terrible. If you ever tried to get around downtown at about 3:30, 4 o'clock in the afternoon, I was trying to get to the scene, but they stated they had a person in custody, and I decided just to turn around and go back to the office instead of trying to go to the scene, take the defendant in custody myself, and bring him back.
To make it straight, you never made it to the scene at that moment. Presumably you went a little later.
Initially, I did not make the scene.
Okay. But your partner, he went right to the scene.
He was closer to the scene. He decided to go to the scene.
And you were informed that they had someone in custody and was on its way back to headquarters, is that right?
I was informed that a person was taken into custody and that patrol was actually transporting him to our office.
So then you headed back.
That's correct.
And what did the suspect ultimately arrive?
The patrol unit, Officer Bed and Smith, I contacted them via radio, informed them where to bring this person into our building because we're located at police headquarters right across the street from here. And we have a basement entrance that's gated, and they brought him through that area, and I told them I would come down. We have an elevator in our office that goes right directly down to there, and that's where I met him.
And when we're talking about the suspect in this case, we're talking about the defendant, Aaron Ybarra, is that correct?
We're talking about Mr. Ybarra there, yes.
So you met them downstairs, is that right?
I went to the basement of the building. There's gated entryway coming in and going out, and that's where I met him.
What information were you given just sort of generally prior to interviewing the defendant, or prior to coming in contact with the defendant that day? Did you know anything about what had happened at the scene other than a shooting, or about his being taken into custody?
I had been contacted. I've been in contact with my sergeant and the sergeants at the scene. That there was initially on the radio when it came across, as Sergeant Hancock stated, it was chaotic, and it stated at first, they had one person, one shooter, then possibly a second shooter. And I've worked patrol, and I've been involved in chaotic situations, and I knew the first couple minutes, it's a lot of trying to figure out and feel your way through a lot of this stuff. But eventually, I think it was Officer Smith that came on the air that stated that they had one in custody. And at that point, I didn't believe there was a second suspect. So I was in contact with my supervisors. I asked them what type of witnesses we had, who was hurt, who wasn't hurt, and I stated that they had multiple witnesses, and they were going to confiscate the gym across the street, set up tables, sit off detectives there, and they were going to interview each person that came out of that room.
So you had other detectives taking care of witness interviews at this point?
My supervisors were managing the scene.
Okay. And what about the person in custody himself? Well, let me ask, Officer Smith, and you were here for his testimony, is that correct?
That's correct.
When they arrived and you met them downstairs, what did they give you any information about him, about the suspect? Did they tell you he'd been pepper sprayed?
It was obvious he'd been pepper sprayed, first of all. When they arrived, they took him out of the car. I could smell the pepper spray on Mr. Ybarra. His eyes weren't open, and I took the officers aside. I believe it was Officer Bed. I asked him, had you talked to him? Have you given him his Miranda warnings? Has he said anything? Has he acknowledged them?
And what was the information that you had?
Officer Bed stated that they had given him his Miranda warnings. He acknowledged that he understood them, and that when I asked, did he say anything, or has he been talking, what's his disposition, they said he was cooperative, and he started talking about the events of the day already, and that he'd been planning this for a while.
Okay, so you kind of had that information prior to you sitting down with the defendant that day?
Yes.
Let me ask you about that. When the officers testified, they testified that the recording in the back of the car should have picked up that conversation, but didn't. Is that something you looked into during the course of your investigation?
Yes, the officers talked about that, but the officers weren't aware of that at that very moment. And as one of the primary investigators, we're responsible for gathering the evidence of this case, and that's one of the first things we looked into. So immediately within the following days, when things calmed down, one of the first things we do is we pulled all the in-car video for all the units that responded to that scene that day, not just Officer Beds, but that was one of the primary ones we wanted to listen to. and I immediately started playing it and listening to it and watching the video, and I immediately noticed there were issues with the equipment.
Did you check within your office and in your department to see if that was something that could be fixed, or was that just gone, was not reported?
We do have a unit that is responsible for maintaining that equipment, making sure there's no issues with that equipment. And I contacted the in-car IT people. We pulled that car. They looked at the equipment. They tested it, and they said yes, there was a problem. The back camera, not the camera, the back mic of the car malfunctioned, was not working.
So tell me about your first interaction with the defendant then. They had told you he was cooperative and talkative. Tell us about you coming into contact with him.
I had the officers bring Mr. Ybarra upstairs. We rode the elevator together. At that point, I had them clear him, pat him down. At that point, I told him to take his handcuffs off. I directed him, we have a bathroom right there in our interview area, and I had them take him in there because they stated he had been not temporarily, but partially decontaminated at the scene. Basically, his eyes were washed out, but I believe he was probably handcuffed. My understanding was he was handcuffed at the time. So I had him patted down, cleared of weapons, properly removed from him, the handcuffs removed, and I told him, let Mr. Ybarra go into the bathroom there, stand there, and watch him wash his face, and allow him to do that.
So when you're talking about decontaminate, literally just in a bathroom sink, washing out with water.
That's pretty much.
Okay.
I mean,
not something special.
Yeah, there's
Okay.
not much to do for pepper spray.
During that interaction, while that's going on, does he appear to understand what you're saying or be responsive to the things you're telling him to do?
I'm not talking to him that much at that point. I'm directing the officers, but Mr. Ybarra was following direction, and he even noted he was surprised how nice we were and the police, considering what he had just done. And then when they finished with him, they escorted him into one of our interview rooms I had set up already.
Well, let me go back and let me ask you about that statement. You indicated he was surprised you were being nice to him considering what he'd done. What did he say exactly? Do you remember? And I do have a copy of your follow-up if you need it for details, Detective.
If I can refer to that, I can give you probably a more detailed account.
That first the witness showing up.
Yes.
And you went to the mark. Identification states. Is that a copy of your follow-up? And I guess is that a copy of the kind of documenting, not everything, but the sort of significant things that you and your partner, Detective Takamoto, did on this case?
This is what we call our case investigation report. Basically, when you do an investigation, we keep what we call a case investigation report. It's pretty much a living form. As we do things that are related to the investigation, we'll document it as far as date and time and put a summary of what we did. Depending on how detailed we need to be, that's the information we'll put down there. And then as we do the course of investigation, we'll refer back to our case investigation report. And then ultimately, if we end up testifying in court, that's what we use. Where officers, like Officer Abed at the time, he was an officer, or Officer Smith, they're responsible for writing a detailed statement exactly about what they did that day. And this is my case investigation report, along with Detective Takamoto.
Okay, so as partners, you have the same, you kind of keep a running sort of a running tally of what, or not tally, but a running account of what each of you have done in the same document?
Correct.
Okay. So if you can turn to page 3, I think you talk specifically, and I'm just interested in what he specifically said at that moment.
Do you want me to tell you the quote?
If you have quotes, if yes, that would be great.
I put down what he said in quotes. In my follow-up, I stated Ybarra was cleaning up. He said he was surprised that the officers were not, quote, kicking his ass or, quote, beating him because of the things he had just done.
So he assumed that you all would respond in a different manner because of what he had just done?
Apparently so.
Anything else that during that interaction that the defendant said or you heard him say before you kind of, I guess, let me ask, he's still in the custody of Officer Smith and now Detective Abed at that point?
He's in the homicide office at this point. He's unhandcuffed. He's my charge at this point, and they're just cleaning him up. He's been cleared of everything, and we're going to put him in an interview.
So anything else that you witnessed about their interactions with him during this period of time in terms of him saying anything or along those lines?
I didn't witness anything else. I don't recall anything else.
Okay. And during that period of time, well, let me ask you, you talk about putting him in an interview room. Is what goes on in the interview room audio taped and videotaped?
We have 4 interview rooms in the Seattle Police Homicide Unit, and they're all audio and video recorded. And as required, once we put someone in there, first thing we do is we inform them that, 1, where they're at, and 2, that they are being audio and video recorded.
And so before we go sort of get to what we will be able to see ourselves, I'm just wondering about that period of time before he gets into that room. Does he complain about being in pain at all, other than the pepper spray, or does he say anything about the pepper spray?
Well, where the elevator comes up and where the interview room is sitting, I activated the audio video recording system before he was even up there. So at the beginning of the interview, you will hear voices off camera, and that's the officers, myself, Mr. Ybarra. You'll hear the elevator ding as we come up, but at no point did he say anything like that.
Did he complain? Mr. Ybarra was there for a long time, is that fair to say?
That's fair to say.
Do you remember approximately when he arrived and when he was ultimately transported elsewhere?
If I can refer to my follow-up. So I stayed here at 1640. I activated the audio video equipment, and then he was brought upstairs at that point, and he was with us till later in the evening. He was with us till he was booked into the King County Jail.
So, like 4 or 5 hours, is that right? Or 5 or 6?
Approximately 4 to 5 hours, I believe.
And so I have a question about that whole period of time. Throughout that period of time, did he complain or talk about being pepper sprayed or show the effects of being pepper sprayed?
Mr. Ybarra showed the effects of pepper spray, yes.
Like, what do you mean specifically?
Pepper spray is for the department, it's one of our less lethal weapons, and it's probably the less lethal of all of the less lethals we carry or we're allowed to carry. And basically, the OC, or the Hawaiian capsicum, which is a derivative from the pepper or red pepper, if it's sprayed in your eyes, or if you've ever had spicy food on your hands and you wipe your eyes, I mean, it's the same effect, but a lot more intense. It's a burning sensation in your eyes because you have this heated element in your eyes, which will cause you to close your eyes, cause your nose to run, and if it's on your clothing and stuff, it'll be in your throat. It'll cause you to hack, cause you to cough.
And so was he showing those signs?
Yes, he was.
Throughout the duration of your time with him, did he complain of any other type of pain or physical discomfort that you recall?
No, he did not.
Like trouble breathing or anything along those lines?
No, he did not.
During the entire time let me ask, he's in that room for the vast majority of that time, is that correct?
That's correct.
Gets taken out to go to the bathroom and stuff like that a few times, is that right?
That's correct. Another thing about our rooms, when you're putting on one of our rooms, in the detective's bullpen, if you want to call it that, we have a huge TV, probably a little smaller than that you can see all the rooms and all the activity going on in those rooms. So he was constantly monitored, maybe not from that room, but from where we were at. There was always eyes on him. And at no time did he ever ask for any additional medical care or showed any stress or anything like that. And we, I believe, informed him, if you need anything, knock on the door. And that never occurred.
So So other than the pepper spray that continued to bother him, nothing else that you observed or anybody monitoring him observed?
That's correct.
Well, what about that, your interaction, during the course of your interaction with him, did he appear to understand where he was and what was going on around him?
Yes, he did. In cases like this, when someone decides to walk onto a campus and start shooting people, I've been doing this for 28 years. I've been a homicide detective for 12. You kind of want to get a base feeling of where this person's mental state is. So, I always start an interview before I just don't walk in there and like, tell me you did this. That's TV. In real life, we don't interrogate, we interview someone. And I walked in there and I sat down, introduced myself. I got some of his basic personal information as far as who his mother was, who his father was, what were their phone numbers, what is your address, what is your phone number, things of that nature. And he answered all those questions without any issue. The only thing was he couldn't open his eyes very well.
Throughout the course of your interaction with him, did he appear to, like the question and answers back and forth, appear responsive to one another? Did they make sense?
Oh, yes, they did.
Did he ever, being in that room with him, did he ever appear to be hallucinating or responding to internal stimuli?
No, he wasn't.
During the course of your time with him, did he ever ask you if the shooting really happened or say it was like a dream that you recall?
No, my understanding was he understood that the shooting occurred.
So we're going to watch the videotape of your interview with the defendant, and I want the jury to have a little sense of that before we get started. You indicated it's audio and videotape. Does the time show on the actual videotape itself?
At the time of our recording, the system we had, we were in the process of updating it. And I believe it's 15 or 16 minutes fast on the time, what you see there. And I think when we turned over that information to you, we also made you aware of that.
So we're going to see it, but it's 16 minutes.
Approximately 16 minutes fast.
And I think I indicated before, sometimes he steps out of the room, and sometimes you guys step out of the room and leave him there. Is that right?
He steps out of the room?
Well, he goes to the bathroom. He doesn't step out, sorry. But he's taken out of the room.
He's escorted out of the room at times.
Do you want me to pause, Your Honor?
Yeah, we're going to take a short break and come right back out, and then you can queue up the videotape during that time.
Great.
And then we can come back and forth. All right, we're going to take a very short break, just a couple minutes. Please rise for the hearing. We had a juror just indicate that they needed to use the bathroom real quick, so that's why I took the break. So we're going to keep Mr. Ybarra here. We're really going to just take 2 or 3 minutes, and then we're going to bring the jury back out again.
And actually, Your Honor, I appreciate having a moment. Should have let the court know this earlier. As the court is certainly aware,
You can be seated.
there's a long period of time where the defendant is in that interview room. A good portion of it, no detective is talking to him.
Yes.
I don't intend to have the jury sit through all 5 hours, I believe, of that. So in a couple things, I do want to hand out a transcript to the jury so that they can follow along, solely for purposes of listening to following along with the interview at this time, not to go back to the jury room. And with permission of court and counsel, move forward during the period of time when the detectives are out of the room for any length of time.
What's your position, Ms. Prentice? First on the transcript.
I do do not object to a transcript as long as the court advises the jury that it may or may not be 100% correct.
All right. I'll advise the jury that they should listen to the actual recording for the evidence in the case. It's just to assist them in understanding it. And then what's your position on the fast forwarding of the video?
I do not object as long as every time it's done, the exact amount of time that is fast forwarded through is advised.
That sounds very reasonable.
And we'll have the transcript, so it should reflect accurately the transcript and that I haven't skipped a chunk of it. I hopefully I wrote it down correctly, and I will state for the record when I'm moving forward.
Well, it would show on the screen, right? You could tell the amount of time that's elapsed if you fast forward.
Yes, my point is it will not, I had to write it down by hand last night, so if it, and it should, the transcript, of course, doesn't pick up the gaps or reflect the gaps. So if it's it should be, every time I stop and start, it should be consistent with when the transcript reflects speaking. Hopefully I've gotten it all correct, and I will make sure it's on the record where we're stopping and starting.
And would you like me to advise the jury that the gaps in the tape are not reflected in the transcript?
Yes.
All right.
How long is what you're going to show up for?
An hour or so. I think it started to.
Do you want to get started and break?
Yes.
Yes, please.
We're going to get started.
Okay, I just want to make sure we're going to break because.
Oh, at lunch?
Yeah.
What's that?
Council is making sure that we're going to break at noon.
Yes, we will.
I don't think there's
No,
any
we will.
problem.
But we're going to use the time we have.
Thank you.
Why don't you go see how the jurors are doing?
And I'm going to ask to have the copy of the transcript marked, and then can the skill pass those out to the
Yeah.
teacher?
Am I loud enough? Loud enough. Oh, yeah. Okay. I'm just sitting back there.
If they're going to ask you to pass out copies of the transcript, they're going to put them on the bar right there.
You can instruct them. I'm going to
I figured you would.
have you.
It's exactly like what's.
I will give you a copy of what is State's Exhibit 128. And that has been marked, and Detective, I'm going to actually ask you can follow along as well.
Ask you to 123 minute.
That was my question. I didn't think it was. I don't think it was after. We skipped it.
Truck
123.
and shell one.
Yeah.
Oh, is that one?
The second one.
No, it did not, because I was waiting for his partner. So,
Only came by May.
no, 123, I believe, is number one from outside, and I did not have number 5, and Detective Coxwater brought it into me just moments too late. So, I will ask, I did not move to admit it yet, intentionally.
All right, will you want to check on the jury? They just did.
Oh, did you?
Yes.
Is that a one? Second.
I know. That's a 127, and
See, it's 127.
Please come in and be seated. You may all be seated. Mr. President?
Detective, just a couple more questions about the interview before we saw it. You had told the jury that I believe it was Officer or Smith or Detective Abed that informed you they had already advised the defendant of his Miranda rights. Did you re-advise him?
Yes, I did.
Did he indicate that he was willing to talk with you?
Yes, he acknowledged his rights, yes.
During the period of time that he's in that interview room, at times you step out of the room, is that correct?
That's correct.
Did you have another detective or any other detectives assisting you with the interview or interacting with the defendant while he was at Seattle Police Department headquarters that day?
I did. My partner, Detective Takamoto, of course, he was stuck at the scene, and he ended up interviewing witnesses at the scene. At that point, I needed another detective to interview Mr. Ybarra. Even though we're audio video recorded, we prefer to do it in teams. And at that point, Detective Duffy, who's also in my squad, Dana Duffy, she had, I believe, just come back from court or somewhere, and I asked her to assist, and she stated she would, and she assisted me with the interview.
And at times both of you, one or the other of you step out, but at times both of you step out, is that correct?
That's correct.
And during the course of time that you're out of the room, have you reviewed, in addition to being there that day, reviewed the whole tape? You see what the defendant is doing when y'all aren't in the room?
I've watched it multiple times.
Okay. So it's fair to say sometimes he's coughing or rubbing his eyes during the period of time when you're not there?
That's correct.
Sometimes he's kind of rocking a little bit, but for the most part he just sits in that corner, is that right?
That's correct.
And the reason I'm asking, I'm going to skip some of this so we're not all sitting here for 5 hours. Just make it clear that nothing else, he doesn't do anything else other than basically those things while y'all aren't in the room, is that correct?
Yes, he never said anything or asked for anything while we weren't in that room.
And in fact, is that interview, the times when he is being questioned or talking, has that been transcribed by your department?
Yes, it has.
For the record, the videotape of the defendant's statement has been marked, I believe, as State's Exhibit 127.
Yes, recording.
And the state does move to admit and publish that to the jury at this time.
And 127 is admitted.
And Detective Cooper, I think you have in front of you State's Exhibit 128, is that correct?
I do.
And is that a transcript of the statement of the defendant that's contained on State's Exhibit 127?
Yes, it is.
And I would ask that the transcript be handed to the jury to review while they're listening to the audio.
Members of the jury, you're going to receive now a transcription of the tape that you're about to watch. We'll watch part of it till noon today, this afternoon, and then we'll watch the rest in the afternoon. The evidence that you're to consider in the case is the actual recording itself. The transcription may or may not be completely accurate at points, so you're to rely on the recording itself. Also, the transcription does not contain, obviously, gaps of silence, where there may be gaps in the recording itself, as was just discussed by the detective. So with those admonitions, would you pass out the transcripts for the jury? The transcription is to assist you in understanding the tape clearly. And again, we'll not go back with you to the jury room. The recording goes back, but not the transcription itself. I'll turn it up.
For the record, Detective, what is the timestamp that is actually on the video before we get started?
6/5 of 2014, and it says 4:55 and 9 seconds p.m., and it's actually should be approximately 4:40.
And that's actually reflected across the top of the video, so people can remember it's 16 minutes fast.
Exactly.
Thank you.
Can you turn it up?
Aaron, can you look at me?
No, I tried earlier. I tried to wipe off my face, but just,
Okay.
I gotta get rid of it.
Well, listen to me. I'm Detective Cooper with South Police.
Okay.
Okay, you're up here on the 7th floor, the investigations floor. Everything's being video recorded. You're in a police station just for your safety and our safety. And I just got to quickly do this advisement for you. I think the officers already did to you. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can't be used against you in a court of law. You have the right at this time to talk to a lawyer and have one present while you get a question. If you cannot afford one, one will be appointed for you. Do you understand those rights?
Yes, sir.
Awesome. Okay, sit tight. You want some water or something, Barbara?
I would love some.
Okay, I'll get some water. You guys wait here. Here you go. Hold up your hand. There's some cold water for you. Okay, there's a cap on and everything like that. I broke the seal already for you, but have it sit up back, and I want to talk to you in a minute. Okay.
It's at 4:58:14 in the right front. It's not that long, but is this essentially sort of the view of what's going on and other gaps during this interview with the defendant? You will handle your fellow detectives or otherwise?
That's correct. Aaron, this is Detective Cooper again. Hey, I just want to get some information from you. How do you spell your last name?
Ybarra.
Okay, your middle initial?
R.
Okay, and where do you live at right now?
Lake Terrace.
What's the address there?
4305238. Southwest.
4305. Okay.
238. Place Southwest.
That's Mount Lake Terrace?
Yeah.
Who do you live there with?
My parents.
What's their names?
Janice and Ambrose.
And how do you pronounce your dad's name?
Ambrose.
Ambrose, okay. And do they have the same last name?
Yeah.
Okay. What's your cell phone number?
206
Mm-hmm.
484
484
4450
80
50.
50. What's the contact number for your parents?
My mom is 206
Mhm.
601 8854.
Your dad?
206 257 8979.
8979.
Yeah.
Okay, sit tight for a second, bud.
I'm pausing this at 5:0025 p.m.
Before we started up, they had a brief sidebar.
Yes. I just want to reiterate, the transcripts you're just getting for this period of time watching the videotape. So to the extent you take notes on them, you'll never see those notes again. So keep notes on the paper that you have in the 3-ring binder and only on that paper. Thank you.
I've restarted this at 5:10:38.
Eric, how's the eyes going?
Getting a little better, not quite though.
Okay. Try not to, the more you rub your eyes, the more you get the stuff in there. You want to rinse some more? Okay, sit tight for a second then. Hello?
I'm pausing again at 5:11:14. We get 5:14:15.
You see it?
One eye.
You want to rinse again?
I don't know yet.
Okay. You want a wet paper towel or something maybe?
Will I do when you get?
It might cool your eyes a little bit, as long as you don't rub them too much, but you can dab your eyes with it. You want me to just bring you one?
Yeah, sure.
Careful. It'll take a while, 6:45 minutes to an hour for it to go away. That's a little bit, that was gonna take. So, I'm just out here to keep up this yell.
All right.
Next stop the tape at 5:21:43.
Members of the jury, we're going to continue with this tape at 1:30, so if you would please leave your notebooks in the chairs and leave your transcripts on the chairs and come back at by 20 minutes after 1, and we'll continue and review the rest of the audiovisual tape. Please rise to the jury. We had a sidebar where Ms. Richardson advised me that it looked like some of the jurors might be writing on their transcripts. After the sidebar, I said on the record that they should not run